I'm going to turn the meeting over to Kaylee. Kaylee, are you there?
I'm here, yes.
Okay. Kaylee is the president of the Pre-Law Society, Larry, so she's going to sort of run the meeting and introduce you, and then we can have questions after you are finished. Okay. Go ahead,
Okay, so hi everyone. So we have Dr. Tomei with us here tonight. Dr. Tomei received his doctorate in education and educational administration at the University of Southern California. He has served as Vice Provost of Academic Affairs at Robert Morris and is currently an education professor here. And today he will be talking with us about test-taking tips and specifically how to sit for the LSAT. So thank you so much, Dr. Tomei, for joining us, and I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you. What a nice crowd. Looks like there's 24, 25 of us here tonight. That's an excellent turnout, Dr. Schwartz. I think the speaks very well for the Pre-Law Society. And I think, well, you guys may not know, but I'm on Lou's advisory board for your organization, and I have been very much interested in it for many, many years, stemming back to when I was on the provost office. But in the last couple of years, I have moved back over to the School of Education, or whatever we're calling ourselves now, and have taken up my mantle as a professor of education, with an emphasis for me on instructional technology. So I've done a lot of work with schools getting their virtual reality systems and online programs going, and educational psychology. And it's actually part of educational psychology that I want to talk to you a little bit about tonight. So if you will allow me, I am going to use the technology that is available to us tonight with the Google Meet, and share with you a presentation that I created that is entitled "How to Prepare to Sit for the LSAT." I'm not a lawyer, but one of the things I wanted to share with you right off the bat, and Kaylee was nice enough to offer some introduction of my background, is my experience with standardized tests. And that's all this particular slide is designed to show you. I'm not trying to overwhelm you or over-impress you with my background, but I do have a bachelor's degree in business from the University of Akron, where I grew up. And I just wanted to share with you some of the standardized tests that I've had to I've encountered over my career in education. In a business administration side, as an undergrad, as most of you probably, I took the SATs, standardized test, on the way into my 4-year undergrad program. And I sat for the Certified Public Accountant exam on the way out. So that's kind of what I'm trying to show you here. I have a master's degree, 2 of them, one of them in public administration. And to get into that master's program, I had to take the Graduate Management Admissions Test, the GMAT. Again, that was my entry into the program. And to get out and get certified, I took the Public Administration's National Test, right, to get my certification as a public administrator. After I did that for a couple of years, I decided I wanted to really get into education. My wife was a teacher, and after we married, I found out she was having a lot more fun as a teacher in the classroom than I was having as an accountant in a business or a public administrator working for a city. And so I picked up my second master's degree in education. To do that, I had to take another standardized exam called the Graduate Record Exam, the GRE, on the way in. On the way out, to get certified in the state of Pennsylvania, I had to take a series of praxis tests. There's an exam that tests the individual's foundations, in education, which is actually mostly what we're going to talk about tonight, and not just their how-to piece, but the content area. So my certification in Pennsylvania is in business, computers, and information technology. So the Pennsylvania Department of Education has us taking a variety of tests to become certified. And then finally, when I started my doctorate of education, we were required to take doctoral admissions exams. These were from the state of California, where USC is. And so those were fairly standardized tests. And coming out of that, I had to take some final exams in dissertations. So I hope you see from that, again, I'm not trying to prove anything to you other than your LSAT is certainly going to be the first of many exams that you might take if you're interested in becoming a lawyer. Dr. Schwartz was nice enough to let me take a look at this huge, thick book called the LSAT Prep Book. And I've got some tips and techniques that I think you might want to think about if you are going to be sitting for that sometime soon. Okay, so with that as a introduction, I want to go through a little exercise that I used to go through when I was the vice provost and I attend the first year studies programs that Robert Morris offers. I want you to just take a piece of paper and I want you to number from 1 to 9. Okay, so little hands-on practical exercise here. Number from 1 to 9, and then you're only going to put down one word next to those numbers. I'm going to read you some statements, and I want you to decide whether you agree with that statement or you disagree with it. You have to answer all 9 questions with either an A or a D, and you can't agree with everything. I want you to think about your learning style. When I did the first year studies program, and the reason that I talked to Lou about this was because we've got students coming in as college students. I know I was in the same boat, and nobody ever talked to me or helped me determine how I learn the best. Okay, I was taking my master's programs before the light bulb clicked on and said, hey, I learn best this way. And other students learn best in different ways. And if you're going to study for the LSAT, you better have a knowledge of how you learn the best. So that really is the intent of tonight. Okay? So let me read you the first 3 questions, or the first 3 statements. And again, an A or a D. And then we'll come back and kind of see where we are. As a learner, do you prefer grades and other incentives as a motivation to learn? Okay? Agree with that or disagree? I like grades, I don't like grades. I like incentives, I don't like incentives. It's either an agree or disagree. And I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. Number 2, as a learner, I prefer to be graded according to consistent standards of achievement that the instructor sets for the class. Okay? Everybody is graded the same way. Okay? I don't like to find out that, my score of a 85 got me a B, and this guy over here, his score of an 85 got him an A minus. I want to be graded according to a uniform set of standards. And then finally, or the third one here, I learn best when the instructor organizes the curriculum along a consistent path that's quite sequenced. I can see where we're going. Tonight we're going to look at A, B, C, and D. Okay? Now, A or D for those three questions. And we'll come back to this slide to kind of see where you are. Let's look at the next one. 4, 5, and 6. As a learner, I like it best when my teacher wants to know what I was thinking when I answered a question. Okay, so this is the example of the math teacher who says, show me your work. Okay, some teachers want to see your work. They want to know what you were thinking. They want to know where, where you might have made a mistake. Other learners say, look, I either got it right or I got it wrong. It's okay. All right, so agree or disagree. I like it best when my teachers allow me to monitor and control some of my or much of my own learning. I like to be able to talk with the teacher about what I should learn. And then finally, I develop my own building blocks of information that allow me to adapt new knowledge to existing knowledge. Okay? So when I learn something, I kind of create a little, think of it like little building blocks for little kids. And I stack one on top of the other on top of the other. That's the way I learn. I learn best by having those building blocks. All right, that was 4, 5, and 6, and we'll wrap it up with 7, 8, and 9. As a learner, my school experience, and you could use Robert Morris as an example right now. The school experience should help me develop positive relationships with my peers. Okay? So the school experience should be one in which I can interact with my other students, and that's important for me. 8, students should set their own standards and evaluate their own work. Some teachers let you do this. Okay? And then number 9, teachers should develop a climate that's challenging, but pretty much supportive, exciting, and free from threat. Okay, so I'm going to make this a little smaller for just a second so I can see who I've got over here on my screen. And let's take a quick review. I want to know how many of you agreed with all 3 of the first 3 statements. If you did, raise your hand down here. Nobody agreed with all 3? Wow, that's interesting.
Here, people are raising their hands. It's just not showing up.
Oh, there it is. Okay, that's coming. All right. So a number of you. Looks like maybe 14 of you. Okay, good. Lower your hand. Click on it again. Let's get rid of that. Let's look at the next group of questions. This was the one about building blocks and understanding what I already know and building on past information. How many of you agreed with all 3 of those statements? Again, raise your hands. Okay, we had 12 of them. Okay, good. Lower it. And let's look at the last group. The school experience should help me develop positive relationships with my peers. I'd like to be able to create some of my own standards, evaluate my own work, and I expect to be in a learning climate that's challenging but free from threat. Hands up. Okay, we had 9, 10 of those. Okay, hands down. Okay, good. Now, it's important for you to know which of those 3 was your most prominent, because that is your particular learning style. If you agreed with 1, 2, and 3, you are what we in education call a behavioral learner. And it's important for you to know that. You want things in a stimulus, response, reinforcement. I ask you a question, you give me an answer, I tell you, yes, you got it right, or no, you got it wrong. Okay? You like things organized in a sequence. You like to know exactly where you're going. Okay? If that's the case, you're a behavioral learner. And you like teachers that stand up in front of you in a classroom and teach you using that style. Okay? If you come to one of my classes, I always tell my students, I'm a behavioral teacher. If you look at my blackboard shelves, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you look at my tests, it's ask you a question, get an answer. Ask you a question, get an answer. That's the behavioral way of learning. And we learn a lot of things that way. And a lot of the reviews in this book are behavioral. I'm going to share that with you in a minute. So if you're a behavioral learner, put a big B on your paper and stand by for how you might prepare yourself to sit for the LSAT. The second group are cognitive learners. They do more thinking. Okay? The behavioral learner is a stimulus and a response. The cognitive learner builds on knowledge. Okay? It's kind of like why we learn history 1 and then history 2, or Spanish 1 and then Spanish 2. Those are cognitive approaches. And they help you learn because you can take new information and say, all right, what do I already know about that? Okay? You can reason that way very easily. And if you started to look at the LSAT prep books, you're going to see the word reasoning over and over and over again. Matter of fact, you best be ready to learn, to take your LSAT with some good reasoning skills. And here's where you get them. Now, it doesn't mean if you're a behaviorist, you can't reason. Okay? It's just that's your strength. And then the last group is what we call the humanist. Okay? These are what I lovingly call my warm, fuzzy, and touchy-feely people. Okay? The students, they go to school. I got a 16-year-old granddaughter. She'll turn 16 tomorrow. She goes to school, and she has a good day at school when she can come home and said she had lunch with her friends and had, talked to them during study hall, and they're going to go out together on Friday night, and that's what she looks at school. And if that is there, she can learn very well. This is also the kind of person that did you ever take a math course? Math seems to be particularly prone to this. And the instructor gets up there and gives you this big, long equation of how to compute the length of a flagpole when you're standing on the ground. I remember seeing one of those one time. And when you see something like that, and actually that's probably a better example than most, but when you are given a formula like that and asked to solve for X, what question do you ask yourself? Those 8 or 10 of you that said that you were agreed with all three of these. You probably turn around and ask yourself, when am I ever going to use this? Okay? That's the humanistic side. And again, in the LSAT book, you're going to find several areas of logic and several areas of comprehension that will be strong if you think a little bit more humanistically. So, if nothing else out of this session tonight, you should know whether you're a behavioral, cognitive, or humanistic learner, because you're going to get into courses, if you haven't already, with college instructors who are one of these three types when you are a different one, right? Okay? If you ever walked into a college course and the first thing the teacher says is, hey, let's go around the room and tell me what you did this weekend. Now, wait a minute. This is a class in psychology. Why are we wasting my time telling you what I did on Friday night? Okay? But she's a humanistic teacher. Nurses are very humanistic, thank goodness. A lot of the teachers that I prepare to go into the classroom are very humanistic. Okay? You go into an accounting class, and the professor stands up there and starts giving you debits and credits and income statements and balance sheets, and here's how you put it together, and I don't care what you did on Friday night. This is how you put an income statement together. Very behavioral. Okay? And then you've got a communications person who is teaching you comm skills, who's teaching you how to write, teaching you how to public speak. And they go through a series of courses that build, okay? And they're helping you create a building block approach so that you can use and be better off when it comes to communications. So with that as a background, let's get into the meat of this now and talk about the LSAT. You know what it is. It's the application that you're going to need to get into law school in programs across the United States and Canada and probably around the world. I don't know where all of those testing locations are, but I guess is, Dr. Schwartz will, and he probably talk to you about that. But I have spent the last couple of weeks looking through this book to find out how many similarities there are between the LSAT and the SAT, the LSAT and the graduate record exam, the LSAT and the GMAT that I took. Standardized tests are fairly common, and they're fairly structured in terms of how they present and ask questions. For the LSAT, you've got 3 sections. Again, I may be telling you something you know, but if you don't, this is a great time to start getting your head around what this test is all about. There's 22 to 24 questions on logic and logic games. Okay? 20 to 24 questions on logical reasoning. 26 to 28 questions on reading comprehension. And then you have to do a writing sample, which isn't graded, but it's sent to any law school that you might apply to, or at least they can ask for it. So you see some of the key terms in here? Logic, games, reasoning, comprehension, reading. If that doesn't lead you to think that, wait a minute, there's a couple different things going on here. This is not a simple test that only measures one thing. And so if you can look at it and say, you know what? I'm strong in behaviorism, maybe this is my strong area. So let's go through some of those. Okay. I looked online, as I'm sure you have already, excuse me, to find that there are a boatload of books that you can buy to prep for the LSAT. I found these in a little over 5 minutes. This Power Source one, which is different. I've got the Kaplan one, pretty much this one right here in front of me. Okay, but the Kaplan one attempts to give it all to you in one book, and that's kind of nice. Okay, but these ones from Power Source are divided up according to the pieces of the LSAT. I mean, here's a book that deals strictly with logic games.
Larry, let me interrupt for 1 second. I just want you to know that in going over this, that the Power Score books that you're referencing now are the ones that are recommended highly in the NAPLA, National Association of Law Advisors. And they, at least, although I tell the students that they can get any comparable books, these are highly recommended.
Okay, thank you very much. And feel free to jump in any time here, Lou. Don't feel like you're interrupting or anything. Okay, so what he just said is these Power Score books, are preferred, and it's pretty simple to figure out why. If you look at them, they're probably a third of the size of this monster book that I got from Kaplan, because they focus in on those 4 areas. And so if you are strong in reading comprehension, if you're not concerned about being able to read a paragraph and answer some questions about it, you may want to buy the books that are more logic based. Okay, so I think it's kind of a pretty good way of being able to focus on the ones that that are your weaknesses rather than your strengths. When I broke it out, I found that the sub parts or sub elements of the LSAT I showed underneath these as bullets. For the reasoning section, they're going to teach you reasoning methodology and formal logic. We'll talk about more of these more in a second. Under logic games, they've got questions dealing with games methods and game types. With logical reasoning, they have some reasoning method, and then they have questions on making an argument or a non-argument. And in reading comprehension, they talk about reading methods and passage comprehension, being able to read a passage and answer questions about it. So that's what is in each of these Power Score books, which might be better for some of you than the more general Kaplan book. So I think what you have to do is find the ones that are best for you. So let's keep going here. I went through these, and remember I asked you to put a B, a C, or an H next to your name, okay? And what I want to share with you now in the next couple of slides is comparing the 4 categories of the LSAT, which how I perceived them to be the major focus. Okay, so for the first section called LSAT reasoning, in which you're dealing with reasoning and formal logic, from what I've been able to garner from this, and maybe Dr. Schwartz had put it differently, but the way I see it, if you're a behavioral learner, then the LSAT reasoning with formal logic ought to be one of your strengths. Okay? It's strongly behavioral. When I started to look through the book and I started to look at questions, formal logic statements. If A, then B. If B, then C. Then what's the next one? Well, then it's if A is B is C. Very behavioral, okay? And those kinds of questions in the LSAT are going to be mostly your multiple choice questions, in which you're going to have one right answer and the other three are wrong. So if you're behavioral, you should do well on the reasoning portion of this. If you have a big C next to your name, then you got a little bit more work to do. If you're humanistic, you got a lot more work to do. Okay? That is my take on looking through the LSAT. And I leave it to you, and it'll be interesting when it's over to see how close I was, to see if section number 1 of the LSAT reasoning, is where the behaviorist, if you said you were B, is where you scored the highest. It'll be interesting. Okay? If you are a cognitive or a humanistic learner, then you need to start probably buying one of these logic books, one or more of those, because you need to beef up your preparation in that area. Okay? The second area was logic games. Okay? And this one, very similar to this one on reasoning, is very behavioral oriented. Okay? Game methods, game types, what they're doing apparently is preparing you to do battle with other lawyers when it comes time to stand in front of a judge. And so they go through game methods and game types. If you're a behavioral learner, logic is your strength. Okay? Not so much with cognitive, and perhaps even less with the humanist. The next one on reasoning. Now, reasoning is a cognitive skill. You learn how to reason based on what you already know. It takes your prior knowledge. You're introduced to a new situation, and you have to work your way through it. Okay? Arguing for something or arguing against something. The best example I give my students is you're sitting in a classroom at Robert Morris University, and the bell rings, and you're going home. And home is in Monroeville. For those of you that are, I think everybody's familiar, but if you're not, Monroeville is in the east side, way east side of our county. Okay? Robert Morris is in the western side of Allegheny County. Monroeville, Penn Trafford, Franklin, Plum, all those communities are on the eastern side of our county. Okay, so I say drive from Robert Morris University to your home. How are you going to get there? Okay, you're going to use your reasoning, your cognitive skills, and say, well, I'm going to get in my car, I'm going to leave the campus, I'm going to go down to the Parkway West, and I'm going to take the Parkway West through the Fort Pitt Tunnel, through downtown area. I'm going to go out the other side, go through the Squirrel Hill Tunnel, go out the Parkway East, and I'll get where I'm going. You can do that because of reasoning skills. You have a background, you have a process that you know will work. Okay, so then I throw a little wrench into your reasoning. I throw something into these gears that are over here, and I say, PennDOT has just closed off the Fort Pitt Tunnel. Okay? What are you going to do? Well, the behaviorist has a problem with that because he or she says, here's my sequence. I get on the Parkway West, I go through this, I go past the green tree, I go there and I go up and that's the behavioral approach. The cognitive approach said, well, yeah, I know how to do it, but now I've got to change. I've got to adapt. Okay? So in this book on preparation, it talks about how you can reason differently and how you can address these questions that you're going to get on the LSAT that require you to create an argument. Okay? And the cognitive learner has the distinct advantage here. Okay? Whereas the behavioral learner, not so much. And the humanistic learner is still kind of behind here, still having some issues. So again, if you are a behavioral or a humanistic learner, you're going to start buying these books on logical reasoning. Okay? So it can help you develop those skills. And then finally, the last piece is reading comprehension. Okay? How to take a passage of a paragraph or a passage out of a text and read it for comprehension. The behaviorist wants to read it. The cognitivist is reading it to see what is new information and how they can use it to adapt to what I already know. The humanist, when it comes to reading comprehension, has the advantage here because they are personalizing this reading comprehension. You know, I was reading some of these questions in here. You know, most gardeners are people with a great deal of patience. Since most of Molly's classmates are gardeners, at least one of Molly's classmates must be a person with a great deal of patience. Okay? Read, you know, that's part of a paragraph. You know, students were asked by a psychologist to tell a lie before a discussion group and argue for either for or against their actions. If you are a humanist, you're going to have a distinct advantage here, okay, with reading comprehension. If you're a behaviorist, you have the lowest chance of doing well on reading comprehension. You know, these are the people like me. I read the paragraph once and that's it. I don't have to go back over it again. I'm just looking for a specific piece of information I'm getting out of there. And if I get it, great. If I don't get it, well, that's fine too. Okay? And so I am going to go buy the book on reading comprehension if I'm a behaviorist because I need help there. Okay? So that was my take. And here's kind of a recap on it. Anything dealing with reasoning or logic or games, the behavioral learner, those of you with a B next to your name, have a distinct advantage, okay, in 2 of the 4 areas. But you need to be buying the textbooks and the learning books for the other 2. If you're a cognitivist, I'd spend my time on reasoning and games. That's where you need your help, okay? If you're a humanist, I should be okay with reading comprehension. I'll spend my time on the other 3. So that's what I wanted to kind of share with you tonight, was this idea that if you have an understanding of how you learn, then you can better prepare for the LSAT by focusing on, out of the 4 areas, focusing on the areas that perhaps might present the most challenges for you. And that's what I wanted to share with you. And I hope you walk away from this at least saying, you know what? At least I know what kind of learner I am. And when I go to Dr. Tomei's class and I'm a humanistic learner and he doesn't ask me if I had a date on Saturday night, I'll know why. Okay? Because he's not really concerned about that. I actually had, and I'll finish up with this last story. I had an engineering professor that came to me a couple months ago. And he said, Larry, I've been at Robert Morris now for 3 years. I've taught the same engineering course every semester. And my students have always done well. They have done well on the tests. They do great in my labs. They just seem to get it. This semester, I don't know what's going on. They're all flunking my tests. Nobody is asking questions. They all look at me like they don't understand a thing that I'm saying. Why did that happen? And I said, because as an engineer, you are probably a behavioral learner. And you got lucky the first couple of years where the majority of your students came into your class as behavioral learners. And you guys meshed real well. Now you got somebody else. All right? You got a cognitive learner in there. You got a humanistic learner in there. And they don't get you at all. And you better figure out, this goes on both ends. The professor, I said, you better figure out how to teach to the other two styles of learning. And I wanted to go to the students and say, you got to do something when you find yourself in a class, okay? When you find yourself learning something like preparing for the LSAT, you have to figure out how to convert what they're trying to teach you into something that is good for the way you learn, okay? So the behaviorist is going to do flashcards, going to highlight things in a textbook, you know. The behaviorist is going to maybe make an organizational chart. So, you know what, last semester in accounting, I learned debits and credits. This time I'm learning income statement. I'm building on that. So they have to help themselves. And I hope you guys do very well on the LSAT. And I hope a little of what I gave you is useful when it comes time for you to prep for it.
Larry, before you open it up for questions, I had a couple questions that I wanted to ask. In recent last year or so, law schools have now, a lot of law schools, including Harvard, are now accepting GREs in place of LSATs. And it occurred to me when I looked at the two tests that the GRE is very light on logic. And it seems to me from what you're saying, and by the way, I don't know where you were 42 years ago or so when I was taking these things. I would have liked to have this education. It seems to me that from what you're saying, that there are many students who might be better off taking the GREs than taking the LSATs.
Yes, that's absolutely right.
So
okay.
if you're not a behavioral learner, then the GREs may be better for you.
Yes, I think that's true.
Yeah. If that, as a takeaway for the students here, I think that's an important thing to know.
Yeah, good point.
And the second point I wanted to ask is, it seems to me also that there's a huge generational change. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think I've noticed in recent years students having more difficulty on multiple choice type questions than they did in the past. And perhaps that's because they're more humanistic than they used to be. And I don't know if that's a valid observation or not.
Oh, I think it is. You know, it's the students, and I did a mini study at Robert Morris. I found that the students in the last few years are doing much better in the comm skills courses, reading comprehension, argument and research, public speaking, much better than they did 5 years ago, and doing a little worse in some of the more objective kinds of courses like Accounting 101 and so forth.
Yeah, because I have found that on my recent final exams that I've given in my class, that the students do far better on the essay portions than they do on the objective portions.
Yep.
So, okay. Do any of you have any questions? Well,
I think we made it all the way to like 25 people tonight. That's great.
well, I am continuing, and I'm going to continue to have all of our meetings virtual, even when this pandemic is completely gone, because having them on campus, you get 8 or 9 students to a meeting, and now even though I beg them to come tonight, we also always have a decent turnout, and I think that's good, a good thing, and there's more interest this way. Larry, do you have an email address that you could share with the students in case they wanted to call you personally, because sometimes they don't want to ask questions?
Absolutely. It's a little hard to see, but it's on the last slide that I used in my PowerPoint presentation. Okay. If it's okay, Lou, I will send the PowerPoint presentation to you, and feel free to distribute it to your students.
Thank you.
For those that would like to go back and look at what I said, or as you know, this session is being recorded, so you can bump up the slides with the recorded session if you want to look at it again at some other time. And my email address is on the slides.
Oh, that's wonderful. So once again, does anybody, any of the advisees here have any questions for Dr. Tomei? Nobody?
I must have done a good job.
Yeah, must have been a great presentation. It was for me. I learned a lot. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be taking the LSATs in the near future, but it is a great thing to know, is, if nothing else, that they really have to take a look at the GRE as compared to the LSAT, depending upon what their strengths are.
Yeah, and I suspect most of them will probably decide to take both of them. And, it's like when you're an undergrad, you take the SAT and the ACT, because the focus is just a little bit different in both of those.
And that's a good point, because they do use the highest.
Yep.
Those scores. So,
you're telling me that.
Well, thank you very much for joining us.
All right.
And I will be in touch with you again, and I have to disseminate the recorded session.
Okay, I'm going to go teach my grad students here in a minute. So you don't forget to stop the recording when you're done with it. And if there's anything I can do with the pre-law folks again in the future, just let me know.
Okay, we're going to continue a meeting, general meeting, and to stop the recording, I would
click the 3 dots and says stop.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Caitlin, thanks for leading us off. Good night, everyone.
Well, that should stop it. Well, if it's recorded for the rest, I don't think it matters, but I clicked on the stop recording. It doesn't seem to work. Oh, I see.